Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the education section. So this video is going to be on ensuring predictable performance. And the rationale behind creating this video is we know performance is super beneficial not only towards our muscle building related goals that many of you may have, but there's a lot more to it than that when it comes to the effects of building muscle has on your progress. So the potential benefits of improving your performance and as a result building muscle can have is a higher calorie maintenance. If we can increase the amount of muscle mass we have, we can increase our basal metabolic rate, which is our calories burnt at rest. We can also have easier fat loss as a result of that. We can generally look leaner at the same body weight. Someone who's got a lot of muscle mass is going to look a lot leaner at 10% body fat than someone who's not got a lot of muscle mass. It's got a benefit in terms of your bone mineral density, your ability to manage your blood glucose or your blood sugar levels, and regulate them more effectively. Your mass can act as like a sponge and soak in any additional carbohydrates you have, whereas if someone doesn't have a high level of muscle mass, they've got a poorer ability to regulate their blood sugar levels, which has got a big impact on our health. And overall, you'll have better health and longevity. So it can create easier fat loss, more sustainable weight management as well. And the more predictable we can make our performance, the more predictable we can make our progress. So if we can think about nailing variables that's going to allow us to step forwards more effectively in the gym, then over the long term we can make more progress. And hydration is what I'm going to touch on first. Hydration can have a big impact on our ability to perform. Even a small drop in hydration, a small percentage, can have a decent impact on, or a negative impact on our performance. And your hydration's not just a case of drinking water. There's more to it than that. So what adequate hydration involves is sufficient electrolyte consumption as well as sufficient water intake. So what will contribute towards appropriate electrolyte consumption is going to be things like salt and also using hydration formula. So in things like salt, we get sodium, potassium, magnesium, which are some key electrolytes that we can get. So that's why it's generally not a bad idea salting your meals to taste. For those who may have, let's say, pre-existing conditions, they might want to visit their GP, get the green light to then maybe add salt to their diet in a bit higher dosages before putting this into place. But most people can benefit from having a little bit more salt. You get a small portion of the population who are salt sensitive, meaning having salt can actually raise their blood pressure. The best way to know is measure it before and after. But if someone's eating a clean diet, they're not having a lot of added salt in their foods, then they're probably going to benefit from having a bit more. Because where do we usually get salt from? It's usually from things like crisps, fast food, so things like chippies, pizzas, burgers, pastas. When we have quite a clean diet, unless we're adding salt ourselves, we may not be getting an appropriate amount, especially if we're training a lot and sweating quite excessively during those training sessions. And with our electrolyte consumption, it also scales with our water intake. So the more water we have, the more we'll flush out our electrolytes through urination and through sweating. So we would therefore want to take in more electrolytes to have a sufficient balance. And if you're training first thing in the morning, I'd say trying to aim for at least a litre before your training's a great place to be. And from there, if you train not first thing in the morning, a bit later, space it out a bit more evenly throughout the day to reach your daily total. Generally, I recommend cutting off your water, depending on the individual, pre-bed. Let's say 2 hours isn't a bad rule of thumb, just so you're not up during the night to use the bathroom. So then just have like a litre first thing in the morning, space out the rest of your water pretty even throughout the day is not a bad rule of thumb there. And with better hydration, you'll have a better ability to get blood to the target muscles in the gym and get what people would class as like a pump, which can help basically your performance. And also, it generally feels good having a pump in the gym, if you've ever heard that term before. So next up, we've got our nutrition. So we've got different macronutrients. In other words, like we've got different key foods that they're split up into different groups. We've got protein, carbs, and fats. So to just give you like a quite a basic description of each, protein will build and repair muscle. Carbohydrates, they're our main source of energy. Fats play a part in our hormonal health and will slow down digestion. So As a result, when we're thinking about our pre-workout meal, we ideally want appropriate protein. We ideally want appropriate carbs as their main source of energy. And as for fats, if it's a long session or we're eating very far away from training, we want a higher fat meal so that we've got a slow release of that meal and we don't run out of energy for that workout. And if someone's training and they're eating pretty close to immediately before it, they want lower fat so the food doesn't sit in their stomach throughout their session. So as for protein, generally just split your daily goal up between your meals. If if let's say you've not got like a specific, you're not tracking your calories, let's say, just aim for like let's say a fistful of protein. It's not a bad place to be, but yes, pretty much split your protein up evenly. So if someone's having, let's say, 200 grams, they're eating, let's say, 4 times a day, then 50 grams having your meal. If someone's having 150 grams, and of course divide that by the amount of times you're eating, and then that's an easy way to space out your protein. Carbohydrates, this could be anything from like white rice, oats, fruit. It depends on, again, what sits well for yourself, how far away from training, and what phase you're in. Something else to think about is also fiber. So if someone's having like a high fiber containing meal, that will sit in your stomach a bit longer, that will take a bit longer to digest. So maybe keeping fiber low if someone's got really high food, so that they can digest that well fine if they're having it close to training. So the meal composition should be influenced by your proximity to training, the size of the session, what body weight you are, and what phase you're in. Someone who's, let's say a 40 kilo female, they'll need a lot less overall carbs in that pre-workout meal with someone who's double the size. So take it with a pinch of salt. But generally, have some protein, have carbs, and then make sure you're well hydrated. It's a great place to be. Salt in your pre-workout meal. We want to place salt if we are adding salt to our meals. Again, you can consult your doctor, etc. First, we want to have our pre-workout meal and post-workout meal a bit more heavily salted because that's when we have more requirement for electrolytes. So we can next, and we can also think about on that point using electrolyte powder as well when we are maybe sweating a bit more or it's warm outside. It acts as a good insurance policy, and especially if you're training like first thing in the morning, it's not a bad idea just to ensure you're definitely hydrated, and it also has other ingredients in it can have potential benefit. So the next thing we can think about for predictable performance is going to be our sleep. So sleep's shown to have a significant effect on things like our performance, our injury risk, and our ability to recover. So there's a lot of resources I've already provided on things like sleep, but some basic practices to try and nail, and the fundamentals with sleep are trying to sleep 7 to 9 hours. I know people have different commitments, some people have children, but think about what you can control. Regardless if you have children, you can still control not scrolling on social media the hour before bed. You still can control your room temperature to an extent, unless your partner's having a go at you. So yeah, we can still control some element of sleep. We can still put the brightness down on our phone. We can still use like dull lights, etc. There's still things we can do in our control. So instead of thinking, oh well, it's easy for such and such to do this, so but I've got this on. But what can you do? That's all we can really focus on, what we can do in our control. So sleeping 7 to 9 hours in the ideal world is absolutely brilliant. Having a cool room, a pitch dark room as well. And we need our body temperature to drop to get into a deep sleep, hence the cool room. The reason we want a pitch dark room is because noise can disrupt our sleep quality. You can get earplugs, which are from Silicone on Amazon, which are a great investment. We can think about using like the white noise from a fan, which can help drown out other noises as well, which can help our sleep. We can think about limiting light in the hours prior to bed. Round about 2 hours isn't a bad place to be. The reason being is bright light and blue light disrupts your ability to produce melatonin. Melatonin helps you sleep. We can think about getting off our phone 1 hour before bed, regardless of the light that the phone produces. It's a stressor. It's not going to be relaxing, checking social media, checking the news, checking work emails. So getting off your phone an hour before bed. If you find that a hard habit to stick to, make it easy. Turn your phone off, put it the opposite side of the room, make it as awkward as possible to get to. And getting bright light in the morning can help set our circadian rhythm, set our 24-hour body clock. Circadian means round about 24 hours in Latin. There's a wee fun fact for you. So making sure we're getting bright light in the morning will help promote good sleep quality. If you don't have the ability to maybe get outside for bright light and you work at home, you work at a desk, you can use a SAD light, which can help for seasonal affective disorder. And also, regardless if you get that, which is somewhat like feeling a bit more depressed in the winter time, it can help your sleep quality. So something I use on a daily basis while I'm eating my breakfast. So stress management. Stress is something else that will have a massive impact on our training and our ability to move forward and make our training predictable. So a good way to look at stress is what you can recover from or your overall stress load, right? It's like a glass. The glass is filled with stressors outside the gym and also the stress you're doing inside the gym. In other words, your sets, right? And if you are already got that glass half the way full through stress outside the gym, then you're not left with a lot to recover from inside the gym because half of that's already occupied. The glass is only so big. In other words, your recovery is only so much. So if we've got half of that filled with stress from outside the gym, from work, relationships, uh, bad habits regarding, like, let's say, phone use, what we're taking in, uh, how we're auditing our environment, sort of thing, that's going to impact our ability to recover and also have good sleep. So some basics to ensure you have in place in terms of stress are plan your days and weeks. So stress comes from the feeling of overwhelm, not knowing when we'll get things done. So thinking about making sure we're super organized helps. And like for example, if someone's like concerned about like university work, why are they stressed? If they know they're going to get everything done in an exact time, if they're prepared, they're probably not going to have as much stress. So being organized, being prepared, not leaving things last minute, planning our days and weeks helps massively. Getting off our phone the hour before bed, use that time to relax. Have that time where we're not taking in any sort of stimulus. So we're not, because we're always stimulated throughout the day. Whenever we have a spare second, what are we doing? We then pick up our phone and we're scrolling things unconsciously. Like getting outside, going walks, going in nature is shown to have a positive effect on our ability to manage our mental health and our stress management. It's shown that when we like are looking in more of a long distance, that's and when we walk in nature, that's shown to decrease stress. So getting off our phone, getting outside in nature, planning things in that have stress management benefits of you, and that will be dependent on the individual. For some people, that will be walking with their dog, playing with their cat. For some people, that will be sitting playing a game. For some people, that will be having a hot bath or a sauna, because some people might absolutely hate the sauna. It might actually be a negative to them, whereas other people might enjoy it. So part of it's dependent on the individual. Audit your environment. What are you taking in? What stressors are in your life that you're allowing to come into play? And thinking about being sensible with our stimulant intake, which will include things like caffeine and also nicotine. So they drive a stress state and a state where we're not recovering well. We can also think about our perception of stress. Sometimes, and I think we've all been there, we can like get well stressed about things that really aren't that aren't that much to get stressed about. Like we don't really need to get that stressed about them. Like if you're stuck in traffic and going ballistic, one, you can manage that by just giving yourself more time, and two, it's not going to make the traffic disappear. So our perception of different situations, stress, and practicing gratitude can also help. And with the caffeine, cutting that off with appropriate time frame pre-bed. So making sure we're keeping that 8 hours away from bed because it's got a half-life of around about 5 hours. So that's absolutely key there. We can also think about some certain supplements that help stress, which we'll get to. Yeah, we cannot remove all stress. That's not sustainable. That's not feasible. But we can manage it, and we can again reduce unnecessary stress that we have on a day-to-day basis. And as for training, so some things that can affect our ability to move forwards and have predictable performance in terms of training is going to be, of course, effort, making sure we're applying appropriate effort, and that will allow you to get enough stimulus, enough stress to cause adaptation, which then allows you to perform better the week after. So making sure your effort's in a spot, making sure you're confident. I see it time and time again. A client has some doubt creep in their eyes, and then they don't get a rep, they don't progress their set, and it's not a case of they've not had the ability to. It's the case that they've mentally tapped out, and then their ability to perform is diminished. So making sure people are staying confident in their sets, thinking about standardizing our warm-ups and doing so appropriately. So basically making sure we're warming up the same on a week-to-week basis. We're not warming up completely different, doing more, doing less, using that time to drill our technique. And talking about technique, making sure we're standardizing our technique so we're using the same range of motion, we're having the same arm path, we're having the same stance, we're making sure everything is pretty appropriate in terms of our setup in that sense. And also hitting the session up the previous week, so we know our ability to progress is going to be underpinned by what we've done the week before. If someone's not hit their session the week before, they're not used to the movements, skilled at the movements, and their ability to progress them, the following week is going to be a lot better. It's going to be diminished. So hitting the session the previous week. We can also think about keeping our exercise order and selection the same. If someone's constantly changing them about, then they're not going to get as much from them. And the reason why exercise order, of course, matters is because it makes it not comparable if it's changing consistently. And the reason your exercise selection matters is we've got a better ability to progress exercises when we carry them out weekly, because we get skilled and used to the movement pattern, which is why it can be harder to progress it if we miss it a week. And also, training's a skill, performing exercises is a skill. So it's like if a tennis player, or take any other sport, or like a, let's say, an F1 driver, you give them like a certain car to race in, and then you change the car the next lap, then you change the car the next lap. Although all those cars are really good, and in this sense, although all the exercises are really good, the fact that they're changing is going to make it harder for that person to perform. In other words, because the exercises are changing, we're not used to that skill, so our ability to get a lot from those exercises will be diminished. And we can also think about our focus within the session. So staying switched on, staying off our phone, making sure we're in a good spot from a mental standpoint, making sure we're maybe listening to music to help our focus. We can also think about standardizing the machine setup, so making sure the seat height's the same, the chest pad's the same. We can think about standardizing our grip, torso, and foot placement. And by standardizing, I just mean the same, making sure they're bang on weekly. And you can take note of them. So use your coaching sheets, use your training log exactly the setup and the adjustments on each machine so you know what to do every week. We can also think about footwear. We can't fire a cannon from a canoe. There's a reason why, let's say, the US Navy have one. They're not kind of firing their I'd say cannons or missiles or whatever. Not cannons. They're not pirates. Firing their missiles off a wee pedalo or a wee paddle board. Why aren't they doing that? Because it's extremely unstable. It's not going to go well, is it? So the more stability we can create, the more force we can produce, and our stability, our balance, and how stable we are starts from the ground up. So if we can create a more stable base, our ability to perform is going to be greater. So control the variables we can, keep things consistent in the gym. And lastly, we've got supplements, which are useful, but only once the basics are in place. So supplements are very much the icing on the cake, but they can still be valuable, especially in certain circumstances when people have, let's say, deficiencies like vitamin D, for example. Then it can be much more than a wee marginal gain, and it can be pretty significant. But supplements, some of them can help our ability to perform. We can consider things like using electrolytes, so they can ensure appropriate hydration, especially in the warmer weather, longer sessions, or training fasted. They can be a good tool. We can also consider, and they can have other ingredients in them that can help our ability to perform. We can also think about carbohydrate powders. So carbohydrate powders like highly branched cyclic dextrin or dextrose can give us sufficient energy availability and make sure our glycogen stores stay topped up, which we can replenish when we have carbs. When our glycogen storage is low, when we don't have appropriate glycogen availability, our ability to perform is diminished. We can't recruit as much muscle. And some honourable mentions can also include things like essential amino acids, which are basically broken down protein, which can help us stimulate muscle growth and basically be in a better position to recover. Any supplements that facilitate better sleep will have a positive impact on, of course, our ability to perform and have predictable performance. And some pre-workouts can have some marginal benefit. The main effective ingredient is going to be caffeine, which can have benefit, but we of course want to prioritize having good sleep and not have that if we're training later in the day. And they can also have some other bells and whistles in them that can potentially help our ability to perform. But what's going to matter most is, again, the other variables we touched on. And lastly, what's going to underpin all of this is having routine. So have routine with all the variables that I've mentioned previously. So Things like your hydration, sleep, stress management, training habits, supplements. If we've got a lot of moving parts, there's more things that can go wrong. The more parts there is in a car, for example, the more things there can break, needs repaired. So if we can create predictable routine, if we can keep consistent our training time, our water intake, our diet, what we eat before a session, our sleep wake time, keep stress management in a good spot, keep a good routine with taking our supplements, there's less things that can go wrong. And you're going to go in the gym, you're going to set foot, and you're going to be confident because you know you've done everything in your power to perform. And if you don't perform well, at least you know you've done everything in your power. So don't leave anything to chance. Have a good routine. And also, when we're more routined, we're more efficient with our variables. So you'll be more efficient with ticking off your boxes throughout the coaching process while you've got other commitments in life, which could be education, work, parenting commitments, and it'll give you the best of both worlds. So people thrive off routine, especially us with our sleep and our ability to perform. And it's shown we adapt to training at a certain time, for example. Like morning training, people typically perform a bit poorer, but when they get used to it and accustomed to it, their ability to perform can increase. So keeping things pretty static can make things predictable, means you're not going to have digestive distress going into the session because you've ate something different. So make sure you're nice and routine is definitely key there. Hope the video helped. If you've got any questions or any resources you'd like to see or any way I can improve the coaching service, then please let me know and I'll happily do so.